Hello there, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Kane, and I'm excited to bring a new project, well, actually, an update to an existing project, and I wanted to do a demo to go through all the work that I've done to improve one of my existing projects. So, and I believe it was back in 2022, I recreated or wanted to create the game called Who Wants to Be a Millionaire with the nostalgic feel of the 2000s. And before I even actually go into explaining what the upgrade is or what the update was, I actually want to draw it. So I've got Creator open, and I'm going to go ahead and actually explain what was the architecture back in 2022, and then I can take it from there to explain the problem and then the solution, and then followed by the demo. So I'm going to go ahead and use my drawing skills, put that to the test. So I'm going to go for a blue. I'm not entirely sure I'm going to use blue, but anyway. So I'm going to say this is who, and this stands for Who Wants to Be a Millionaire. Now, back then, the tools that I used to do this actually was just JavaScript, HTML. See, oh man, pardon. I like to follow the advanced by my terrible writing, but CSS. So I didn't use any web frameworks. And this had a dependency on, I'm going to give it an orange. So this had a dependency on an existing API, which I believe was called OpenTDB. And I can show what this was. So this was an API-based solution, and this, I basically made calls to this database to go ahead and fetch me the question and answers. And I could show that here in Postman. Yeah, so it's OpenTDB, and you can see in the response that it gives me all the questions and answers, which is absolutely great for my needs back in 2022. Now, this at the time really did solve my problem in terms of getting the questions and answers, and I thoroughly enjoyed using the API. Back and around, I'll probably say 9 months into using using this app, actually using the game and trying to play it, and that was a couple of months after publishing my original video. There were unfortunately there were instances where I couldn't actually get any questions or answers from this API. And I don't know the exact reason for this in terms of what the response code was, but what I do know is if I couldn't get any data from this API, I would not be able to play the Who Wants to Be a Millionaire game because I didn't have any backend. And this is where I had a problem at my hands. In terms of, in the sense that I could only play the game that I put a lot of months of time and effort into creating, and I can't play it if the API that wasn't developed by myself, so it was outside of my control, if I didn't return me data, then I can't play the game. And that, to me, was, as I said, a problem. And I thought long and hard about it, and I thought, you know what? How about I create my own backend solution? Well, how about I create my own REST API? So if in the foreseeable future it actually goes down, because I'm the one who created it and maintained it, I can go ahead and look into the problem and go ahead and resolve it for my project. And I thought, that is definitely a worthy cause. So how did I go ahead about creating this new API solution? So I'm going to go ahead and use purple now. So it's ASP.NET Core Web API. And that meant I got to use C# as the core programming language. And then for the backend, so this is going to be serving, so the .NET API is going to be serving as my REST API, which my front-end application will utilize. I then needed to use, I then needed to have a data store to store all of the questions and answers. Now, I was thinking, obviously I was very keen to get this implemented and so I can play the game as soon as possible, but I thought it would probably make more sense to maintain this in a relational database as opposed to storing it in a, let's say, a CSV file. So this is where because I was using Windows and because I was using C# and ASP.NET, I thought it made a bit more sense to use. So I'm going to try my best to try and draw a nice database. All right, that's not bad. So I am using SQL Server as the database. Just for context, I was curious to know how object relational mapping tools worked. And there was a project that I did in the past, and I was really interested to know more about object relational mapping tools. And in one of my past projects, in fact, I believe it was my second video that I made on my channel, I recall not using, so the backend was Node, and the relational database was Postgres. But in terms of how I was able to execute the select queries and the insert, I recall actually creating a query string to do it. So I wasn't using and utilizing an object relational mapping tool. And I was really curious to expose myself to that in this particular project. Now, given I was using ASP Core.NET Web API, it made a lot more, it made sense for me to utilize, let me just get the color. It made sense for me to use Entity Framework. And actually, I believe I was using Entity Framework Core. So this was the ORM, or Object Relational Mapping tool I was using to interface with the, to basically perform the operations against my SQL Server database. So that is looking great. Now, there's one problem though. So even though I have the tech stack created in my mind, I drew this all out and I thought, you know what, in principle, this makes a lot of sense. How am I going to get the data in the SQL Server database? Now, just for context, in terms of how I designed the database in terms of creating the entity relationship diagram, the rough idea of it was that I believe I had 4 tables, but the 3 tables, which is worth mentioning, there's one for category. So an example would be, let's say, geography, history, etc. Another was the question itself. Another table, and sorry, these are tables, by the way. So we got question, we have answers, and I also had another one just for specifying the answer type. So what that meant was you can either have a correct answer or an incorrect answer. Now, the schema made sense, and I had the schema ready to be utilized in the SQL Server database. But the problem is that I didn't have any data. So I was scratching my head. I'm thinking, how could I go ahead and get this data? After a bit of research, I did find this. So this is, by the way, this is for context, this is the Who Wants to Be a Millionaire front-end application. I will come back to this very shortly. But I found this on GitHub. So a user by the name of Uberspot had a project called OpenTrivia QA, and this project, this repository, contained a variety of question and answers for each category. And that's where the reason behind it, that's why I created category. And I thought this was perfect. And this is a potential data source that I can try and load into the SQL Server database. So I wanted to show this just to give the credit that the source of the data, it wasn't created by myself, it was created by this particular user. So I'll put the link in the description to give this user credit. And yeah, so if I just go back to my diagram, I'm just gonna, because it's the web, I'm just gonna I'm just gonna create a spider web. Well, make some attempt. Oh, that's not bad. Okay, that's not bad. That's not bad. I'll label it as a web. So I am looking to create. I'm looking. So we have these bunch of files. So we got. I don't know. What was the type of it again? Yeah, it's basically the raw version. So let's just call it data. So the data is coming from the web. That's basically it. So I wanted to get this data, and I wanted to get it for each category, and I wanted to load it into the SQL Server database. Now, so when I looked at the format of the data, it definitely felt like to me that I was going to have to apply some ETL process, which is for extract, transform, and load. So I decided to. So my original idea really was to. So there was a tool that I was looking into. I'll include it here anyway. So there was an ETL tool called Talent, and the idea I was going to have was to get the data was to basically load the data into Talent, perform the necessary ETL process, and then the output of that to hopefully get it into perform necessary transformations, and ultimately load it into the SQL Server database. That was originally my idea because I had ETL experience, and I thought Talent was something I heard about, and I was quite curious. But unfortunately, that didn't turn out to be that turned out to not work out because Talent, I don't recall, is open source anymore, so I didn't have access to Talent. So I need to think of another way. So, and I thought to myself, okay, how about we just... So I thought, let's try and actually create the ETL process through the C# solution. So through the ASP.NET Web API solution, how about I just create an endpoint? And the purpose of that endpoint is to simply insert to extract the data from this data file, do the necessary transformations, and load it into the SQL Server database using Entity Framework Core. Okay, great. So let me just save this. So let's just say I'm exposing. Sorry, I'm not sure what I put in this, but yeah, let's just say this is the. Let's just say this is the exposure. So I'm going to put an I. I have no idea why, but okay. So this is looking great. So the question I had at the back of my mind at that point was, how was I going to go ahead and get the data to do it? First of all, how was I going to get the data from the GitHub source onto my machine and then get the .NET, to get the C# code to go ahead and access that and perform the ETL process. And not to mention that I wanted to do this process and repeat the process for every single category. So I knew that I had all the questions for all the categories, so I could choose whatever category I want. And that is exactly why I have a category dropdown in the front end, so I could have the opportunity to test my knowledge on a multitude of categories. So back to the solution, what did I end up doing? So I actually created a Windows batch script, because in my current workplace, I'm actually gone exposed a bit more to the scripting side of things, and I created a Windows batch script, and what its purpose was to basically say, okay, let me go ahead and go to the web and download all the files under the GitHub page for each category. So here is hey, go ahead and give me all of the data from this site and load it into my local machine. So that'll be the first thing. So it gives me the data, and I was using a tool called Curl. And I'll show I'm more than happy to share the code for the batch file, and I'll show that running in this. So I used curl to go ahead and get the data. To get the data, download the data and download it to a particular directory. And then once I've done that, so let me just put this, so I'll do 1, use curl to get the data, 2, download the data and save it to my directory, and then 3 is to go ahead and execute and invoke the REST API. And that again was using the REST API using HTTP. I guess I could just put HTTP to go ahead and give do that. Now, just one note on this. This is invoking. So when the API gets invoked, I'm actually passing it a category. So it's this whole process is actually applied. So this is actually this one. So getting the data, saving it, and then using it to invoke the API, the REST API endpoint. This is actually happening for each category. And what is what is this process REST API going to be doing? It's going to go ahead and basically it's going to go ahead. So let's say this is the data. It's going to go ahead and read the data. It's going to go ahead and perform the ETL process, extract the data from the file, do the necessary transformations to get it to match the schema of the SQL Server database, and then utilize the entity framework call to go ahead and save that in the SQL Server database. And this process, as I said, is repeated for every single category. So by the end of it, once I've run the script, I know that I have all the questions across all the categories, and I didn't have to repeat this process manually. And that was one of the key benefits as to why I decided to just to try and automate this as much as I can. Now I think I'm ready to go ahead and show the demonstration. So I'm going to start from the current state of it. So let me go to the SQL Server. Ladies and gentlemen, here is the database schema. And as you can see here, these are so I'm just going to show the tables real quick. We got, and we have score, but score, I believe, is deprecated. It's something that hasn't been used yet, but it might be for a future feature. So these are the key ones. Answer type category in question. Now, if I go ahead and query this, you can see that there's no data at this point in time. And if I go ahead and use Postman to invoke this API, the API should be up and running, which I believe it should be. If I go ahead and try and send it, you can see that it's going ahead and returning nothing in the results. And I'm going to go ahead and do the first part. So if I go back to this, what do I need to do? Well, we got the front-end application up and running. We got the ASP.NET Core API up and running. SQL Server currently has no data, so we need to go ahead and get the data into this. And how do we do that? Well, this is where I can execute my Windows batch script, and it's just within one command. Now, before I go ahead and execute it, let me just go into the actual code or the actual script behind the scenes. That's going on behind the scenes. So you can see that, what am I doing? So I'm basically saying, okay, go into this directory, which is under my project, and just going to, this is basically the directory I would like to save all of the raw data that I'm getting from GitHub. Again, this is not my data. This is all credit goes to the author, which I'll put in the description. You can see that I'm iterating through all the categories that was available to me. And for each category, it's going ahead and using curl to go ahead and fetch the data from the GitHub. And you can see I'm just trying to get the raw data. And shortly after that, I then want to invoke my REST API to go ahead and insert the questions and answers for that category into the SQL Server database. And as you can see, this process is going on and is occurring for every single category. And at the end, I just got a bit of logging just to say like, okay, the batch import has been completed. And that is more or less it. So if I go into my command line, and I execute the script. Let me just go ahead and enter that. Oh, sorry. That is because I need to go in and I'm in the wrong directory. Let me just go ahead and just get into there. Okay. All right. Let me run it now. There we go. We can see that the batch import has been completed. And when I go into the SQL Server database, we can now see all the data has been imported into the relevant database tables. So this query is getting the relevant data from the three main tables, actually for all the 4 tables. And you can see at the bottom that I'm getting I've got all the questions, all the answers, got a description to say is it correct or incorrect, and the name which represents the category. So as I scroll down, we can see there's a multitude of categories: general, music, animals. So the data is now in there. And when I also invoke the API call to fetch all the question and answers, if I now go ahead and test this through Postman, oh, sorry. The reason why is because of the category. The category is going to be something completely different. Let me just go ahead and get an example category ID. Let's just, for the sake of it, I'm into geography. Why not? Let's do 108. So if I repass in the category ID into this API call, I'm sorry, just for context, this API call again is to fetch the question and answers. If I go ahead and re-invoke it now, we can see that we got the question and incorrect answers. And notice that basically the format of the results data, I got it to be as consistent as I can to the original API to minimize the number of changes I have to do in the front end. Now, category I think is fine. There's no difficulty, but the key one I'm really interested in is question, correct answer, and incorrect answer, which we can see is these fields have been correctly populated. So great. So go back to the diagram. We've executed the Windows batch script. The SQL Server data has now been populated, and now there's now data, and we can see that the API is now retrieving data. I could actually go back to the game. If I go ahead and refresh it now, I should now see all the categories that's coming into this, which we can see here now. And if I click one of these, I should be able to click confirm, and I should be able to go ahead and play the game. I actually have no idea on this question, so I'll just ask the audience. There you go. So you can see that the game works as intended, and let's just say I decide to walk away. I'll definitely try and keep the noise to a minimum, but yeah, you could keep selecting categories and play it as you please. Ladies and gentlemen, that is the whole demo. I can see that now I no longer need to use I don't need to use this OpenTDB API anymore. I have my own API that I can maintain, so this is now officially gone. Now, it is funny because in terms of like the whole purpose of why I did this was to minimize an external dependency. Now, to be fair, there is technically a dependency when for this project, and the only key dependency that is an external dependency is whether the data on the GitHub, so whether the raw data is actually available on GitHub. Now, this running of the Windows batch script, this is a one-off operation. So I'll try and put the instructions in my GitHub README section. But the running the script that I just showed previously should be a one-off operation. But once you got that, and once you got the data in the SQL Server, you're good to go. Oh, that does remind me. Just one thing I completely forgot to mention is, because I'm now in the data directory, if I just go to the command line if I just go ahead and list all the files, oh sorry, that's not Linux. Yeah, so you can see in this directory, you can see these are all the files that have been downloaded from the raw from GitHub. So that here's the proof that this data has been retrieved. Also has been retrieved from the web and downloaded and saved onto my local machine. I'll also quickly go into the code. So I mentioned that there was a seed script. So if I just go back to here, so if I go to this post request, it's a post request under the controller question answer. And that would be, so I am in the question answer controller. Here is the post request. I just gave it a name of seed. There's a function or method called consume file, which takes in the category, which is the category that I specify in the script. If I go into this consume file method, which is on the question answer service, you can see, yes, here's the consume file. You can see that I am, so all this part here, or actually this bit here got highlighted here, is reading for that particular, finding the category specific data in that particular directory. And I tried and made an effort to avoid using a hard-coded file path. So instead I just utilized the path variables, or the existing, like using the current directory and combining that with the data name. So I just prevent hard coding the file name, because I remember that's not a good practice, especially if you're looking to deploy the solution across multiple environments, and especially if someone else was looking to reuse this solution in their machine. The file path in their solution might be different to mine, but because I'm using the current directory, that should not be a problem anymore. Just one thing I just wanted to add there. Thanks for watching, have a good day, and I'll see you in the next video.